Have you ever imagined the person you laughed at today might be the one signing your termination letter tomorrow? In the heart of Seattle's financial district, a delivery guy with dusty shoes and a faded uniform, and looked down on, dismissed as insignificant, but he had a plan no one could have predicted. And just a few minutes from now, you're about to witness the impossible. Hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever misjudged someone and regretted it later? Jonathan Harris had been walking the bustling streets of Seattle's financial district for nearly a decade. He knew every service entrance, every back door tucked behind those cold, towering glass buildings. Each day, the worn soles of his dark old shoes picked up another layer of dust. But in his eyes, there was always something steady, quiet, and waiting. There were mornings when he'd step into Foster and Hayes with a heavy package in his arms, catching a glimpse of perfectly tailored suits laughing over expensive coffee. No one greeted him. No one really looked at him. And sometimes soft chuckles echoed behind his back. But he never stopped. Because in his mind, every step was part of a calculation. Every dismissive glance was another brick in the foundation of something they would never see coming. There was something his father once told him. Words he carried every single day. Rough hands can build things that soft hands only dream of. And Jonathan knew. The time had come. Every time Jonathan walked through the gleaming marble lobby of Foster and Hayes, he could hear the sharp clicks of high heels gliding past, whispers of laughter swirling behind him like a cold draft. He kept his head down, gently placing the package on the counter. He didn't need to look up to feel the icy stare of Christopher Blake, the man always dressed in flawless suits, whose words could cut deep enough to make anyone retreat. "Who do you think you are? A delivery guy hoping someone might notice you?" His voice rang out just loud enough for everyone nearby to pause for a moment. The air in the lobby thickened, heavy and still. Jonathan took a breath and smiled softly, offering no defense. But inside, something began to stir. Not anger, but a quiet pity for them. People so busy looking down, they never thought to look around. He signed off the delivery slip and turned away. His eyes caught the reflection in the glass door, a humble man standing alone. But just beyond that glass stood a towering world of opportunity, waiting to be conquered. They looked down on him, but in doing so, they had unknowingly opened the door for what was about to unfold. That afternoon, Foster and Hayes was as quiet and polished as ever. Jonathan placed the package on the reception counter, ready to turn and leave when Christopher Blake's voice cut through the air, casual on the surface but sharp as a blade beneath. "Hey, imagine this. What if one day our delivery guy here sat in the boss's chair?" Laughter burst from 3, maybe 4 corners of the lobby, short, smug, and dripping with cruelty. A female colleague chimed in, her voice so sweet it felt poisonous. "Oh, I'm sure he'd be great at carrying boxes. Right into the boardroom." Jonathan froze. A moment of silence stretched long, heavy as stone. He didn't turn around. He simply tightened his rough, calloused hands by his sides. What they didn't know was that every time they laughed, he added one more line to his list. "Reasons I have to make it." Stepping out into the afternoon light, the sun streamed through the glass, casting soft rays onto his old weathered truck. Jonathan climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, but didn't drive off right away. In the rearview mirror, his reflection stared back, not the face of someone defeated, but of a man waiting for the moment to rewrite his story. Jonathan drove out of Seattle's financial district, but his hands still trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Christopher's laughter and those mocking voices seemed to linger behind his neck, like a small cut that wouldn't stop bleeding. He pulled over to the side of the road and turned off the engine. Inside the cab, silence pressed down, heavy and suffocating. On the dashboard, a pile of overdue bills sat in plain sight, each one a reminder that while he stood still, the world outside kept moving forward without mercy. Jonathan closed his eyes and pictured his father's face. The man who once told him, in a quiet voice, "You don't need to shout to be heard. Just let your results do the talking." His breath steadied. Suddenly his phone buzzed. It was Nathaniel, his older brother. A deep, steady voice came through the line. Haven't you heard them laugh long enough? It's time to make them silent. Jonathan looked out the window. The streets bustled with people, none of them knowing that inside this old delivery truck, a decision had just been made. He fastened his seatbelt. The engine roared to life. This wasn't a delivery route anymore. This was the beginning of proving them all wrong. That night in his small apartment in Tacoma, Jonathan sat alone beneath the soft, dim glow of a single lamp. His phone screen lit up with a name that felt like an anchor in his life. Nathaniel Evans, the only person he could speak to without pretending. He answered the call but didn't say a word. Nathaniel spoke first. "You okay?" A long silence followed. Jonathan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "They laughed in my face, Nathaniel. They think I can't do anything more than deliver boxes." On the other end, Nathaniel didn't rush to comfort him. All Jonathan could hear was his brother's steady breath, giving him space, letting that pain settle deep enough to ignite something stronger. Then Nathaniel's voice came, slow and deliberate, each word sharp and steady. "You've got two choices. Prove them right or prove them wrong. Which one are you going to pick?" Jonathan clenched the phone tighter. His eyes burned, heat rising behind them. The streetlight outside cast a pale glow through the window, his shadow stretching across the wall. But it was no longer the shadow of someone resigned. In that moment, he knew he wasn't going to let this story end here. Few people knew that behind that faded uniform was a mind that had always seen value where others looked away. At just 14, Jonathan would squeeze into long lines to buy limited edition sneakers, and just hours later, flip them for 3 times the price. By 18, while his friends were busy partying, he bought an old beat-up car from a neighbor's garage, polished it, listed it for sale, and made his first real profit, the seed money for his very first investment account. There was no magic in any of it, just patience, and eyes trained to spot opportunity before it even flickered into view. While others counted down the days to their next paycheck, he stayed up at night studying stock charts, reading every line of financial reports that no one ever thought he could understand. Every decision, every number he carefully recorded in an old leather notebook, because he had always believed, opportunity only comes to those who are ready. And now, he could feel it. The big wave was coming. This time he wouldn't just ride it. He would be the one steering the ship. For Jonathan, those delivery runs to Foster and Hayes were never just about dropping off packages. They were quiet opportunities to observe the things even the employees themselves overlooked. He noticed the worried looks on assistants' faces as they hung up from tense client calls. He saw long meetings that ended with forced smiles and awkward silences. And week after week, he watched the notice board behind the reception desk quietly update with the names of clients who had pulled out. Yet no one ever spoke of it. One day, as he passed the front desk, someone had forgotten to lock the screen. His eyes caught a glimpse of an internal report. Advertising costs up 200%. Conversion rates down. In that instant, his heart raced. The company they all treated like an untouchable fortress had cracks forming in its walls. And worst of all, the ones sitting in those sleek glass boardrooms didn't even know. Jonathan stepped out into the cold air, the wind brushing against his face, but inside a fire burned. It wasn't satisfaction or smugness. It was the thrill of realization. This was an opportunity, and he was the only one who could see it. Royal Paramount Hotel, Seattle. In a private waiting room, warm golden light glowed softly across a polished walnut table. Vincent Carter, the man who had built an entire real estate empire from nothing, sat across from Jonathan. He took a slow sip of espresso, his eyes cold and piercing. "A delivery man wants to buy out Foster and Hayes?" Jonathan didn't blink. He placed his briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside, neatly arranged files, every page the product of countless sleepless nights. He slid the stack toward Vincent. "It's not that I want to," Jonathan said quietly. "I will." Vincent flipped through the numbers. Silence filled the room, so thick that the ticking of the clock echoed like a drum beat. Then suddenly Vincent looked up. "You've done more research than any advisor I've ever hired." Jonathan nodded, his voice calm but steady. "They look from the top down. I look from the ground up." What they overlook, I see clearly. For the first time, Vincent smiled. You're not here asking for permission, he said. You're here to sit at the table. He reached for his pen and signed the check. Make me proud, Jonathan. The door opened, and the real journey had just begun. Vincent Carter turned to the final page of the file. His hand paused, fingers tapping lightly on the paper. A subtle habit he only displayed when weighing something truly important. The room was so silent that the faint sounds of distant traffic from the streets of Seattle seemed to echo louder than they should. He looked at Jonathan for a long moment, not as a delivery man, but as someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Do you know what made me believe in you? Vincent finally asked. Jonathan shook his head. Vincent leaned forward, his gaze sharp but carrying warmth beneath the steel. You didn't talk about dreams. You talked about data, but between every number, I could feel a heart. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a pen, and swiftly wrote on the check. A number large enough to change not just one man's future, but perhaps an entire company's. This isn't just money, Vincent said softly. This is trust. He placed the check into Jonathan's hand. Show them. You're not just delivering packages, you're delivering the future. Jonathan gripped the check tightly. He wasn't just receiving capital, he was accepting responsibility and an opportunity he could not afford to let slip through his fingers. In the days that followed, Jonathan was no longer the quiet delivery man. He began appearing in small conference rooms, discreet coffee shops, and, at times, private dinners inside luxurious penthouses. No suits, no ties, just a simple man carrying sincerity, and numbers so undeniable that people had no choice but to listen. The small shareholders, those who had once placed their faith in Foster, in Hayes, but now only wanted to slip away quietly, were caught off guard when he reached out to them. He didn't make vague promises, he simply showed them the truth. Profit reports sinking fast, major contracts falling apart, and the only safe way out for them was now. Former executives, men and women who once strode proudly through the company's glass hallways, now sat across from him, heads bowed as they signed their names. No more laughter, only silence, and the quiet acceptance in their eyes that they had been wrong. Jonathan folded each contract carefully. Every signature was another brick laid in the path he had patiently, relentlessly built. And now, he was just one breath away from the finish line. On a chilly early morning, Jonathan placed his pen on the final contract. The soft sound of his signature echoed quietly in the room. But inside him, it roared like thunder. He looked up and met the eyes of the legal representative across the table. There was no hiding the astonishment in that gaze. A delivery man, now the majority owner of Foster and Hayes. No one could have imagined this moment. Jonathan stepped out of the meeting room on the 34th floor of the tower, the very building he had spent years looking up at from the street below. The glass doors closed behind him, and for a moment, the noise of the city vanished. All that remained was the sound of his steady breath and an unshakable certainty in his heart. Inside the elevator, the display ticked down slowly. 34, 33, 32. But inside, he felt himself rising, as if every effort, every humiliation, every long night spent reading line after line of financial reports, every moment spent picking up the smallest opportunities, had all carried him to exactly where he was meant to be. The elevator doors opened. He stepped out into the grand lobby, where the same people who had once laughed at him still went about their day, completely unaware that from this very second forward, every decision made in that building would be his, and he was ready to rewrite everything. The CEO's office door swung open. Thomas Bennett looked up, his brow furrowing the moment he saw Jonathan step inside. He didn't rise from his chair. He sat there, still carrying the posture of a man who believed power was something permanently his. "What are you doing here?" His voice held a trace of impatience, tinged with irritation. Jonathan didn't answer right away. He placed a thick folder on the desk. Their eyes met, one cold and doubtful, the other steady and unwavering. "You should read carefully," Jonathan said softly, his words light as a whisper, yet they filled the room with the weight of a command. Thomas flipped through the documents. With every page, his face shifted, from surprise into disbelief, and finally pale with shock. This, this can't be. Jonathan stood silently, calm, unmoved. As of today, he said, his voice firm but even, I'm the majority shareholder. You are no longer in charge. Thomas clutched the papers, his face flushing red, a mix of anger and humiliation burning through him. But deep down, he knew any protest now would be pointless. Jonathan gave a slight nod, not as a greeting, but as closure. You have until the end of the day to clear your office. I won't be doing it for you. The door closed softly behind him, and this time, he didn't walk out carrying a package. He walked out carrying the power to shape the destiny of an entire empire. With just one short email from Madison Turner, the assistant, the grand hall of Foster and Hayes began to fill. Curious glances darted around. Whispers rippled through the room. Why such an urgent meeting? Does anyone know what's going on? In the front row, Christopher Blake sat with his arms crossed, a smug half-smile tugging at his lips. Probably just another pointless speech, he muttered. But when Jonathan Harris stepped up onto the stage, no delivery uniform, no package in hand, no one dared to laugh. He stood tall, his eyes calmly sweeping across the room. A heavy silence settled over the crowd. Many of you probably don't know my name, he began, his voice steady and deliberate. But you've seen me more times than you realize. A few employees lowered their heads, remembering the face they had once overlooked. Jonathan continued, slow and firm. Today I stand here as the new owner of Foster and Hayes. A wave of gas burst through the hall, only to die down just as quickly, as if no one quite trusted their own ears. He paused, letting the shock seep into every corner of the room. Then, with a calmness that cut sharper than any raised voice, he finished. And from this moment on, nothing will ever be the same. The silence in the hall broke when Christopher Blake let out a bitter, mocking laugh, sharp and clear enough for everyone to hear. A delivery guy, standing here telling me how to do my job. Jonathan slowly turned his head, his eyes meeting Christopher's. Not with anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who had seen this moment coming. He opened a folder on the conference table and slid it forward for everyone to see. For 3 consecutive quarters, Jonathan began, his voice steady, your department lost 3 major clients, all because of broken promises and rigid strategies. The sound of pages turning was soft, but each one cut deeper into Christopher's pride. You spent $2.3 million on campaigns that failed to deliver and ignored internal market reports recommending adjustments. Christopher froze in place. The arrogance faded from his eyes, replaced by something uncertain. Jonathan paused, letting the weight of truth fill the room. I'm not standing here to be your boss, he said quietly. I'm standing here to fix what you refuse to face. The entire room held its breath. Christopher swallowed hard, panic flickering in his eyes. Jonathan looked straight at him, his voice dropping lower, firmer. You didn't fail because you weren't smart enough. You failed because you believed no one would ever dare tell you the truth. Jonathan closed the folder with a soft click. But in the silence of the hall, it echoed like a final verdict. His gaze swept across the room. Faces that once wore confidence, now tightened with tension. Eyes darting away, hands nervously twisting beneath the table. He drew in a slow breath, letting his words roll out calm, clear, and unmistakable. From today, Foster and Hayes will no longer be a place where laziness hides. A few sharp breaths broke the silence. He paused, giving them a moment to feel the weight of the storm gathering just beyond the glass windows. For those who work hard, who are willing to learn and contribute, you will always have a place here, no matter your title, no matter your past. He lifted his chin, his eyes resolute. But if you're here just to warm a chair, cover mistakes, and wait for a paycheck, that door behind you will show you the way out. The hall fell deathly silent. Somewhere in the back, the sound of someone swallowing hard cut through the air. Jonathan allowed himself a small smile, not as a threat, but as a gift, an invitation to begin again. Make the right choice before I have to make it for you. A heavy stillness hung over the hall. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound that broke the silence was the sharp, uneven breathing of Christopher Blake. His face flushed red with anger, but his eyes betrayed something else. Helplessness. He shoved his chair back. The harsh scrape of it tipping over filled the room with a dry, echoing thud. "Absolutely ridiculous," Christopher hissed. "Who do you think you are? Standing here telling me how to run things?" Jonathan said nothing. He simply looked at Christopher, calm, steady, without mockery, without pity. It was the look of someone who had endured humiliation, learned from it, and understood. Some people will never change. They only know how to walk away. Christopher grabbed his briefcase tightly and stormed toward the door. He paused for just a moment, turned back, and spat out one last bitter line. "Good luck. You're going to need it." The door slammed shut behind him. The echo of that door reverberated, lingered, and finally dissolved into silence. Jonathan took a deep breath. He felt no satisfaction, only regret, for a man who had chosen pride over the chance to begin again. As the doors closed behind Christopher, the air in the hall felt thick, almost compressed. All eyes turned to Jonathan, but this time there was no doubt in their gaze, only anticipation. He took a step forward, his voice warm yet resonant, filling every corner of the room. "If you think today is just another meeting, it's not." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Today is the day Foster and Hayes is reborn." Soft murmurs rippled through the room, a mixture of curiosity and nervous excitement. "We will no longer be a company dressed in polish on the outside, but hollow within. We will not chase reputation. We will create real value." Jonathan's eyes met each person's, from the young assistants holding their breath to the seasoned managers now quietly questioning what came next. "I won't promise it will be easy, but I do promise this. Those who stand with us will be recognized. Those who work hard will be lifted higher." He paused again, then smiled. A smile both kind and resolute. "Today, Foster and Hayes begins writing a new story, and all of you are part of it." As the room slowly quieted, Jonathan turned toward the large glass window, where the soft glow of the setting sun bathed the Seattle skyline in shades of pale gold. In that moment, he understood something deeply. What had driven him to this day wasn't just the desire to prove others wrong. He remembered the countless eyes that had once slid past him, as if he didn't exist. But just as clearly, he remembered the quiet, unseen faces of people who had worked hard for years, yet were never acknowledged. "I was once the one standing in the shadows," his voice softened, carrying through the hall with quiet strength. "And I know how that feels, to give everything you have, only to be overlooked." He turned back, locking eyes with the employees who now sat holding their breath, listening to every word. "Today, I'm not here for revenge," he said gently. "I'm here to build something, a place where the capable no longer stay hidden." In the back row, a young assistant blinked rapidly, eyes glistening with emotion. An older employee gave the smallest nod, as if, for the first time in years, they finally felt seen. Jonathan smiled, not out of triumph, but from somewhere deep within his heart. "Because I know I'm not the only one who's ever been underestimated." As the hall slowly emptied, only a few people lingered, and the soft golden light from the chandeliers began to dim. Madison Turner, the quiet, steady assistant who had been with Foster and Hayes for over 20 years, stood still for a moment before finally walking toward Jonathan. He looked at her, saying nothing. She didn't rush to speak either. It was just a shared look, one filled with understanding, the weight of years spent watching good efforts go unnoticed and mistakes quietly swept aside. At last, Madison exhaled softly, her voice hoarse but honest. "I used to think no one could ever change this place." She paused, her eyes glistening just a little, but her smile, gentle, warm, and full of quiet hope, said more than any words could. "But today, I believe you will." Jonathan felt his throat tighten. He didn't need praise, but coming from someone who had been here long enough to know the difference between hope and heartbreak, those words meant everything. Madison gently placed her hand on his arm. If you need someone to stand beside you, I'm ready. And in that moment, he understood. He was no longer fighting alone. The CEO's office door opened with a soft click. Jonathan stepped inside, for the first time not to deliver a package but to take his place in the most powerful seat at Foster and Hayes. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls offering an unobstructed view of the Seattle skyline, now bathed in hues of deep orange and red as the sun dipped below the horizon. The fading light glistened on the polished mahogany desk, on the shelves lined with books he had once only glanced at through a locked door. He walked slowly to the window, placing his hand on the cool glass. Out there were the towers he used to drive past, the streets he had traveled with a heavy load in the back of his old truck. Now, they all sat beneath his gaze. But instead of pride or smugness, a different feeling swept over him, a quiet calm before a much longer, far more difficult road ahead. "This isn't the finish line," he whispered to himself. "It's just the starting point." A soft knock broke the silence. Madison peeked in, her smile warm and steady. "Your first strategy meeting is waiting." Jonathan drew a deep breath. He turned, the door closed gently behind him. And the real journey had only just begun. The story of Jonathan Harris is not just a journey from a disregarded delivery man to the owner of a powerful corporation. It's a powerful reminder of a lesson we all need to carry with us. Never let others define your worth. In life, there will be moments when you're overlooked, dismissed, made to feel small and insignificant. There will be glances that pass right through you as if you don't exist, and careless words that cut deeper than anyone realizes. But Jonathan taught us something priceless, that true value doesn't come from others' recognition. It comes from how you face being underestimated. Instead of letting mockery break him, he turned it into fuel. Instead of complaining, he took action. Instead of reacting impulsively, he quietly built, patiently waited, and prepared for his moment. The lesson is simple but powerful. Stay focused. Prepare in silence. Be relentless with your purpose. And one day, the world will have no choice but to listen. And when you finally stand at the top, don't forget to look back at those who are still being overlooked. Because sometimes all it takes is one opportunity for them to write a story that changes their life forever.